Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kaveh Tafwai. It has been a tough week for Israel. First, the UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to recognize Palestine as a non-member observer state. Days later, Israel announced its plans for the expansion of illegal settlements, including the controversial E1 settlements. International backlash followed, and then came another vote at the UN General Assembly, convincing 174 and 6 against, demanding Israel to join the NPT without further delay and open its nuclear facilities for inspection. Israel's response, a meaningless mechanical vote of a body that has lost all its credibility regarding Israel. Has Israel lost international legitimacy while being isolated? That's what we'll be asking our guests in this edition of the News Analysis.
Israel, the possessor of 200 to 400 nuclear warheads in the Middle East, has rejected UN calls to join the Non-Proliferation Treaty and open its nuclear facilities to international inspectors. Tel Aviv has instead dismissed the UN vote as a meaningless mechanical one. Here's what Israel's Foreign Ministry spokesman Yigal Palmore has to say.
The UN body has lost all its credibility regarding Israel with these types of routine votes that are ensured passage by an automatic majority and which single out Israel.
The harsh reaction comes after the General Assembly overwhelmingly passed a resolution calling on Israel to join the NPT without further delay. The UN vote was held shortly after the US called off a major international conference on banning nuclear arms in the Middle East. The conference was scheduled to be held in Helsinki. The cancellation was strongly criticized by the international community as a move to save Israel's nukes.
Israel, we know, has signed up to nothing, has this nuclear arsenal, and yet it is subject to no sanctions. And there is a double game going on here. And the United States sabotaging the conference to create a nuclear-free Middle East.
This also comes after the UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to upgrade Palestine's status at the UN. Similarly, the move infuriated Israel. Ever since, Tel Aviv has approved the construction of nearly 5,000 settlement units in East Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and the West Bank. Again, Israel has violated UN resolutions that have banned Israeli settlements.
The plan in E1 that we see next to us, east of Jerusalem, is meant to prevent a Palestinian state. It will not be possible to create a Palestinian corridor from north to south. It is sending the Palestinians to the desert to go around in order to develop their country. This will prevent the two-state solution.
Britain, France, Spain, Sweden and Denmark have summoned the Israeli ambassadors to protest new settlement projects. But Tel Aviv, still angry over the General Assembly's vote on Palestine and a resolution against its nuclear activities, has ignored all calls, saying it will stand by its own interests. That's for now, of course. But will that change if the international community piles up pressure on Israel?
I don't think in any time in its modern history has Israel been in a weaker position than it is now. We have to build up the sort of movement which is created to isolate apartheid South Africa by rallying those countries who are genuinely opposed to Zionism with a popular boycott movement. That is beginning to happen across the world.
Well, let's find out what our guests think. Let me introduce them. From Beirut, we have Omar Nashabi from the Al-Akhbar newspaper. Joining us from London, Richard Millett, he's a British journalist. And from Washington, Muhammad Al-Asi, Imam of Washington Islamic Center, joins us. Gentlemen, welcome. I'd like to first start with you, Richard Millett. The UN General Assembly vote on Israel's nukes, it wasn't just a call by a handful of countries. You got 174 countries that voted for Israel to join the NPT and open its nuclear facilities for inspection. What do you think? Doesn't Israel's refusal constitute a regional and international threat?
So, are you asking if Israel is a threat?
Yes, that it doesn't want to admit and open its nuclear facilities, never mind not wanting to join the NPT.
Well, Israel claims that it hasn't got nuclear weapons, so Israel would like, I would understand, to keep that opacity, that confusion going. Maybe Israel hasn't got nuclear weapons, maybe it has. But these kinds of resolutions, as the Israeli representative said in that report, are meaningless. They're non-binding. You've got all the Arab, Islamic countries and African countries and South American countries automatically who are lined up against Israel. But when you look at behind the rhetoric, you've got to remember that at the centre of this, the main worry for many Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia, is Iran. And we saw that in WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks showed us that the King of Saudi Arabia reportedly said that America must cut off the head of the snake, referring to Iran. So Israel isn't the problem. Israel has never said that it will wipe another sovereign nation off the map. Iran is the main problem for many of the Arab countries. Iran has said it will wipe Israel off the map, and there is the worry that Iran will go to war against the Sunni Arab countries.
Okay, well, Omar Nashabi, I'm not too sure why this question seems to revert to Iran in one sense. When we're talking about Israel, and it's purely a simple thing. They don't want to join the NPT. They're slamming the UN General Assembly, and they are saying that we're not going to be transparent. Your response to not only that, but our guest there, Richard Millett in London.
Yes. Well, good evening. I think it's normal that Israelis and the supporters of Israel are a bit frustrated because it has come out in the open now once again that the majority of the world think that there is an injustice in this part of the world, and that Israel is responsible of this injustice. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism or any other lines that are used by the Israeli propaganda. This is a matter, we are asking for a nuclear-free Middle East. And Israel should comply with a nuclear-free Middle East. And today Israel has showed that it does not want to comply with this. Regardless if Israel wants, or the supporters of Israel want to play around and say they do have or they don't have nuclear weapons, there is enough evidence, and there was a book on Dimona, and there was an Israeli, Mr. Vanunu, who actually came out and said clearly and showed pictures and evidence, and this was published in the UK in respectable publishing houses, and it was clearly evidential that Israel has these nuclear facilities and has these nuclear weapons, and that this is not safe for the whole region. And I think the majority of the world, and I disagree completely that to accuse African countries or Asian countries or any other country that are members of the United Nations and degrading these countries by saying that they are being driven by a propaganda that is anti-Israeli. There is no anti-Israeli propaganda as much as there is anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab and anti-Iranian and propaganda. And everybody knows who controls the world media. And everybody knows who has the upper hand in pressuring countries in the United Nations. So I think 174 countries who voted, this is the majority of the world, and in the past few days, 136 countries to vote for Palestine as a member of the United Nations is the majority of the world. And I think Palestine and Palestinians have the right, like anyone else, to have their own country. And they deserve to be a member in the United Nations like anyone else. And so I raise the question, who is trying to wipe off a whole population? I think that is the main question. It's not to always show that Israel is the victim. It's to show that the Palestinians have basic rights, and they need to get these basic rights like any other human being on the face of the earth.
We're going to talk more about Palestine in a bit, but Mohammed Al-Assi, maybe in some respects, some are saying that Israel's staunchest ally, the United States, is guilty. They voted against the vote at the GA on Israel's nuclear program, and also canceled this conference to create a Middle East free of nuclear weapons. And it is said that it is because not only Iran but some Arab nations countering the real reason for that was because of Israel's refusal to attend. How do you see U.S.'s role when it comes to Israel?
Well, this is one of the areas that I think the United States has to be liberated. There's a liberation that has to take place in United States foreign policy, The United States has been supportive of the Israelis' right, or the Israeli government, right or wrong. It has come to the rescue of the Israelis in the United Nations many times, especially in the Security Council. Parallel to the 300 to 600 nuclear warheads that Israel has, it has 300 to 600 American positions of support in the United Nations throughout all of these years. You know, I want to backtrack a little to the statements that were said by the gentleman in London. The head of the snake, he quoted the Saudi Arabian king as speaking to the American government, saying that he would go along with, obviously here I'm using my own words, he will go along with cutting off the head of the snake, and that's in reference to the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think if these politicians had their information properly organized, they would realize that the head of the snake is Tel Aviv and Israel. That's the head of the snake. It's only the nature of the snake that refuses to abide by the international legality. It's the nature of the snake that lives in a jungle that doesn't have any laws. And this is more and more the appearance of the Israeli nation state. It doesn't want to honor international resolutions. It doesn't want to abide by international laws. It could care less for what the world is saying pertaining to its own policies, whether these policies have to do with building illegal settlements in the occupied territories, or whether these policies have to do with wars of aggression, with international war crimes committed in places like Gaza, whether it has to do with the occupation of Jerusalem, which by United Nations resolutions is supposed to be something like an international city with no sovereignty given to the Israeli nation state, which uses all the American diplomatic and political clout to try to have embassies move, foreign embassies move from Tel Aviv and relocate to Jerusalem in the face of everything that is internationally agreed upon. That's one thing. The other thing is the comment by the gentleman in London in which he said that the Islamic Republic of Iran called for the elimination of the State of Israel, and Israel has not called for the elimination of anyone else. Well, sir, I think you should check your information very accurately and the translation sources you go to. This has been claimed time and again that the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran said that Israel should be wiped off the map. That is not an accurate translation. What the President of Iran was saying was that the Israeli nation state will diminish in the course of time, just the way South African apartheid state diminished, just in the same way that the Soviet communist state diminished. Likewise, the Zionist occupation expansionist state of Israel shall diminish. And to put your information straight, sir, and all of those who agree with you, it is the Israeli nation state that has obliterated or is trying to obliterate the Palestinian people. This is not rhetoric. These are policies that are in action. There's 10 million Palestinians who have been displaced or who have been the subject of numerous wars and who have become non-entities. And the Prime Minister, Golda Meir of Israel, said at one time that Palestinians do not exist. Has any official in the Islamic Republic of Iran said a Jew does not exist? So I think we should get our information straight before we make such statements.
Right. And Richard Millett, your response, but one of the things really is, why does Israel feel that it can defy international law, work outside of the law?
Is something that hasn't been ever properly crystallized. Israel feels that this idea of building these new units in East Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim in the E1 corridor is not something that is illegal. The United Nations General Assembly might consider it illegal, but that's exactly what you would expect for the Arab countries, for the Islamic countries, even for the African countries. And in the African Human Rights Charter, that still calls for the elimination of Zionism. So it really is no surprise to hear this term bandied around, illegal settlements. Israel does not feel that these buildings that it's building for its citizens are illegal. And until there is a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians, there is land there that is being used by no one. And once there is a peace agreement, buildings can be withdrawn, people can be removed, like we saw in Gaza.
Let me get our guest in Beirut in on this, Omar Nashabi. Our guest there seems to think that out of the 193 nations that consist of the UN General Assembly, that the law is not curtailed, the law is not catered, for Israel, is what I'm gathering from you, Richard Millett. Omar Nashabi, do you agree? Are all these countries that have demanded Israel to stop their illegal settlements, are they all wrong?
Well, I think I don't know what to say when somebody says that international law is just an idea that has not been crystallized. I mean, this we'd have to, I really don't know what to respond to that. I mean, international law is recognized by the countries that are members in the United Nations, and this is a matter that should be enforced, and this is in order to preserve stability in the world. I think there was an agreement, there were some agreements that Israel signed on in the negotiations that took place in the past with the Palestinian authorities, and under these agreements that were signed by both parties and that were endorsed by the international community and by the Quartet, Israel is not supposed to build settlements. This is a violation of international law. In fact, the declaration of Mr. Netanyahu of building 3,000 settlement units following the vote of the United Nations clearly shows that Israel is using the building of settlements as a punishment to the Palestinians and as a defiance to the international community. This will create more tension, and this is not helpful for a peaceful resolution of the conflict, in which I think the majority of the countries of the world are seeking a peaceful resolution for this conflict that has been going on for so long. A peaceful resolution can only take place based on justice and the principles of justice and international law. These are, these go without saying. These are general principles that I believe anyone around the world should abide by. The United Nations is an organization that was created in order to preserve peace and stability, and in order to create an environment that is suitable for every citizen on the face of the globe to live in a state that is in dignity and in a high standard of living. I think this Israeli entity is creating a defiance of the international community and of the United Nations, and I'm not mentioning the numerous Security Council resolutions that are legally binding that Israel does not respect, such as Resolution 242 that calls upon the immediate withdrawal of Israelis from the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and the East Jerusalem. These are Security Council resolutions. Anyone can read those on the websites. Right. If one wants to know, one can actually have access to international law and can know what is legally binding. Now, if Israelis and the supporters of Israel choose to violate international law, that is a matter that should be raised again, and that explains why so many countries are voting for resolutions that are, contested by the Israelis, because they do not want a peaceful resolution of the conflict, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Richard Millett, I saw you shaking your head there. I'm going to get to you in a minute, but Mohammed Al-Assi, you have these three events that have taken place, and perhaps in no other time has Israel found itself to be cornered? We're talking about the 2 votes of the General Assembly and, of course, their announcements, especially the UN settlements, of which, by many accounts, that just ruins any prospects for a 2-state solution. How do you think this is going to affect the way Israel, by many accounts, analysts are saying, is isolated, and then in turn, its relationship with the international community?
Well, that's a very timely question that you asked. I think it's true. Right now, the Israeli politicians are feeling the heat probably like no other time. But there is a sort of parallel to this. If you can recall back in August 2001, there was an international conference against racism that was held, I think it was in Durban. It was in South Africa, and there was the same climate, the same political climate gelled in such a way that the Israeli politicians and decision makers were feeling the same type of international pressure and international consolidation of will against the policies of the Israeli nation state. Lo and behold, what happened just in a course of less than a month after that, we had 9/11. The world is still living the consequences of 9/11. My fear is that the Israelis being cornered, the Israeli politicians being cornered politically, diplomatically, internationally, the way they are cornered now, they may have some surprise that they will spring on world public opinion along the lines of 9/11.
Okay.
That's my concern.
We're running quickly out of time. We're quickly running out of time. Richard Millett, Israel is cornered, isn't it, like no other time? You have to agree on that. Looking at the spate of events that have taken place, and one thing we haven't mentioned, obviously, is that 8-day war that occurred on Gaza.
Well, no, Israel's been like this ever since it was created. It's always been cornered. But going back to Resolution 242, I absolutely agree, I think, with my colleague in Beirut. That is the only Security Council binding resolution that will have solved the problems between Israel and the Palestinians. And 242 gives Israel full authority, full legitimacy to be where it is in what Israel refers to as Judea and Samaria and the world calls the West Bank, because 242 says that Israel should withdraw its military once there is a peace agreement.
That's not correct. No, excuse me, sir. 242 does not give Israel the right to be in Judea and Samaria and the Golan Heights and the West Bank. 242, according to the two official translation, the French and English translation in the United Nations, says Israel has to withdraw from occupied territories or from the occupied territories, depending on the translation you want. But it doesn't give it the right to stay in the West Bank, which it refers to as Judea and Samaria, and to occupy those lands and the Golan Heights. Let's not, get away with something that is on the record and is there.
Yeah, we're unfortunately out of time. Thank you very much. We're just listening to Mohammed Al-Assi, Imam of Washington Islamic Center there from Washington. Also heard from Richard Millett. He's a British journalist from London. And I'd also like to thank Omar Nashbi from the Al-Akhbar newspaper from Beirut. And thank you for watching another edition of the Press TV News Analysis. Any questions or comments, newsroom@presstv.ir. That's our email address. From me, Kaveh Tahway, and the entire team in the capital, Tehran, it's goodbye.